to have here my colleague and dear friend Anke Hoffman. Did I say your name right? Is Anke or Anka? I never know how to say it correctly.
Anke.
Anke. Okay. So we are here. Basically, anyone that wants to jump in, ask questions, just send the questions on the Q&A here on the box on the Zoom, and you might be able to send some questions on YouTube. And we'll try to give you guys an idea of what it's like to be an entertainment journalist as a foreign correspondent, because it's a very specific niche. It's a very unusual thing. So first, I think we should start with a little introduction. If you can tell a little bit about your work, about yourself, and how you ended up in this line of work.
Well, so my name is Anke. Anke, well, in German you would say Anke Hofmann, but I guess here they say Anke Hoffmann. I came to the United States in 1991, so I've been working as a journalist like a good 30 years. Now I'm working for Germany for a magazine, Entertainment Guide in Germany already that one started in 2004. But before, I've also worked for others. I've written for Dutch magazines. I've written for Australian magazines. But since 2004, my main magazine is TV Digital Germany. And I have a lot of fun. And so what else do you need to know? Ask me questions. Usually we are the ones asking questions and not so much answering. It's a little weird.
It's such an odd space for us, right? And even to introduce ourselves and oh, right, this is a different thing. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Miriam Spritzer. I work for various Brazilian outlets as an international correspondent. I did not have the experience of working in Brazil as a journalist. When I started my career, I was already international. So I think it's also an interesting perspective because I've never had that, in the office in the editorial room type of experience. So I've been working, I started on TV and then I went on to work with print, radio, I worked with, of course, Brazilian television, but I've worked with L'Officiel in Brazil. I still work with them, Harper's Bazaar, Marie Claire, a bunch of other international outlets that were in the Brazilian segment. So that was an interesting experience to have a known title, but to a different country. So
that's actually what we have in common. I also never worked as a journalist in Germany. I've only become a correspondent while I was already here as an immigrant to the United States. So that we have in common. I've never worked in an office per se. I've worked in for a while I did work in an office, kind of we started at 8, not at 9 till 5, but 8 till 4 because of the time difference. Germany is 9 hours ahead. So to make up for that, we started always at 8. And I worked as a photo researcher as well. So I got to see several different, I've also done, I've done TV as well, but not for broadcast, but for the internet, for, the website. I really enjoyed that as well. So we're going to try to bring up that as well, because I think the one thing that we spoke on the phone about is the difference between working in print and online, like in the written article segment, and then working on the broadcast filming type of story, because there are so many little rules that I think apply to the industry. And one of the things that I was thinking when I was organizing this conversation was the expectations that we had when we start working are very different than the reality of the business. So I wanted to know a little bit about you. How are your expectations before you entered this industry? Because I assume, and again, this is basically an assumption on my own experience, that you're probably someone that enjoy watching TV and films. And so you go into this industry that you probably enjoy and admire and was always curious to know. And it's a business. So what was the things that surprised you the most in this ecosystem? Well, I didn't really have expectations, because when I was here, when I, trying to make a living and survive, as it is when you come to in a different country, and have to find your way around, how can I work?
so in the beginning we needed to have, well, I came here with a tourist visa, then I got an I visa. Later I was able to get a green card. So I didn't really have an expectations. There was a Dutch magazine through connections and personal friends. They recommended me. I always enjoyed reading books. I always enjoyed meeting people. So it was a really good fit. And I kind of jumped into the water, right? It was like, I was pushed into the water, and I didn't really have expectations. By nature, I'm not a person of expectations. I just take the situation at face value. And it's like, okay, this is the situation. I'm very solution oriented. So the solution was, I'm going to start writing. And that's what I did. And that's what I've been doing for the past 30 years. And so, I mean, I would love to hear actually from the attendees what kind of expectations they have, because I don't know, I never got that, but I'm also not the person to have these expectations.
Yeah,
what about you?
So please, guys, if you can, just send us the questions, comments here on the Q&A, and we'll try to address. This is supposed to be a conversation, and we talk a lot. So please feel free to send your questions, answers, comments. We're very open people, and we're happy to, well, we're going to be talking a lot between ourselves, but it's nice when you all participate. So yeah, my expectation was very different because I started covering Broadway, and the way that I went about covering Broadway was I knew people in the industry. So whether I knew the producers or I knew the performers, because of my background in that world, it was somehow, I would meet someone that would point me out to the publicist. So the publicist was the end of the road and not the beginning. And then I went to the film festivals, which basically you sign up to different things, and the festival points out where you go, where you stand, and how much access you get. And you start becoming somewhat known through the publicist. But for me, it was a natural thing to only speak to the American part of it, or to the local people. And it was only with time that I realized that you actually had to be nominated to cover something by the studio or by the distributor in your home country. So I was very well connected in the US, but I was terribly connected in Brazil because I started working in the US. So that was one of the things that surprised me the most, was really all the bureaucracy that you had to go through to, at the end of the day, I'm still talking to the people, the domestic people that are organizing everything. But I have to go through that person in Brazil that sometimes I don't even know, to get the access to the thing that of the publicist from here that I know. So that was something that made a knot in my brain in the beginning that was like, makes no sense. I'm here already. But then you understand how things are separated, and, they have their own logistics.
What year did you start, Miriam?
I started 2010 or 2011.
Because when I started around 92,
yeah,
it was less structured than it is now, or than it was, let's say, in the 2000s when you started, or 2010s. There weren't also that many junkets. It was much more, it was so much more open and easy, and you just made phone calls and they're like, yeah, sure. It was much more easygoing. Now everything is much more it has much more bureaucracy. Yeah. And it has much more rules, and of course there were distributors back then, as they existed as well, but they were much more open. Don't forget, in 92 there was a time there was no internet yet. There wasn't
exactly
really emails really. I mean, we would ship around slides. It's like, it wasn't like, oh well, you want a picture, here's a digital file. It was very, very different. You had a typewriter. I mean, that was kind of the start of the computers. So it was very, very different, much more easygoing. And, you had like a tape recorder. I'm talking real tape. I mean, like I had a Sony tape recorder, and I would tape interviews. But it was very, very easygoing. And again, there weren't that many film releases, and not every film release had a junket. It was very, very different.
Well, and that's the other thing, because pre-internet, but you didn't have, nowadays, there is not only the journalists, but you have the bloggers, and you have the influencers, and you have all these other segments that are also looking to get the same press day. So now not only things are more organized, but you have a lot more people fighting for a slot. So it's the business changed a lot with it, with with the internet, and then after even more with the streamings. Because when I started, we didn't really have the streaming services so strong as they are today. So everything was still in person, and it was very focused on different things. And now it's like, oh, a series can be small in the US, but huge in Germany and massive in Brazil. So I think they target a little bit more. But one thing that we are speaking, and I think it might be great for our audience, is, you know, because again, it's something that sounds so natural for us, like talking about junkets and, you know, this type of things. And just to explain to whoever is watching, if you're not familiar, junkets are a press day that they organize to give access to journalists to, like, it usually happens on 1-2 days, maybe sometimes even less than that, where they have round tables, exclusive interviews. And it's the 1-2 days that the cast and creatives are going to meet up with the journalists and, you know, pretty much get all the stories out, whether it's a long lead it's when it's for print. So a lot of the times you do that without seeing the film, or a short lead that it's usually for online and broadcast. And that's usually a few days before the premiere. Now, I think that the best example for that, if we're going to use a common film, is Notting Hill. When we see the character from Hugh Grant going from room to room, that is, I think, the best version of a junket.
Even though in the junket, it's usually the journalists stay in the room and the talent comes in and out.
That is true, yeah.
But, you know, they have creative license, as what they call it in movies. So, yeah.
It made more sense to make him walk around. And I love that they end with a press conference. Because if
you do TV, you're actually walking from room to room. So then you do. Yeah.
When the round table, so that's the thing. It could be an exclusive interview where it's only the reporter and the person who is being interviewed, or it can be a round table where you usually have 10 journalists, and then the talent comes in, chats with us, we ask a bunch of questions, and they leave, and so on. So, or the press conferences which also happens in Notting Hill, that it's basically where the talent is in front of a whole lot of journalists, like 50 or more. And every day more and more. Nowadays, we're having the virtual ones that I think sometimes it's like 500 journalists in the Zoom call. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of people. So guys, you know, keep sending your questions and we'll get to them, but just wanted to clarify that in case people didn't know. But one thing that I also wanted to ask you is, how much do you feel that the pandemic actually impact when we're talking about this now virtual junkets? Because as international press, the thing that we had is that we are local here, and it's so much easier to get access to talent nowadays. Once you have everything on Zoom, what's the difference between being a domestic journalist, well, an international correspondent, and someone that could be in Germany or Brazil, you know, participating in the same virtual junkets and press conferences?
Well, if somebody goes into journalism, usually it's, you know, for the love of being a journalist, or because you're interested in film, television, or just, you know, human beings. And before the pandemic, that was already a hard job, because you don't make that much of, I mean, you're not going to get rich. You're not becoming a millionaire. Let's be honest, definitely not of, you know, being a print journalist. But then now, since the pandemic and since the lockdown, it has switched so much to virtual, even though the in-person junkets are coming back. But the virtual basically made the position of a foreign correspondent, so a person from a different country coming here, working here, a little bit harder and almost obsolete, because many editors could, if they're willing to stay up, you know, depending on what time zones they're in, if they're willing to, you know, be, you know, even do the things in the evening, they can do now the interviews and participate virtually from Germany. So that has kind of weakened my position as a correspondent, and I definitely have felt that. And it makes you a little bit nervous, you know, about what the future holds. But the fact that in-person junkets are coming back a little more and more, particularly for TV journalists, gives me hope that there is actually a future. But it has definitely put quite a damper on our profession, because the editors now can do a lot of things. And, let's be honest, who doesn't want to talk to a movie star or TV star? And usually that's what we did. That was our job, to, be there in person, whether it's in Los Angeles, in New York, wherever. But now the editors can do, I can now have an interview with Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
It's like, and then sometimes they say, I'm a huge fan. Can I do it? And I was like, what am I supposed to say? Yeah, of course they can do it. I'm not, but yeah, it's been harder. And I'm sure you feel it as well.
Yeah. And I think also sometimes it's the privilege of the outlet also. It's a lot of the times the outlet would be nominated because, they already have someone who's there. And now, well, I actually prefer this outlet, or I actually prefer that person instead of the one that's abroad. And we see that a lot. I think that one of the biggest surprise for me, going back to that question of what surprised the most, is how important it is to have a strong network on with the publicists and with the people in the industry, from the perspective of your home country to also the local team. Because if you have that good relationship, I do think that people fight a little bit more for your room there. Like we're talking about a very limited space, and Anke and I will go into that in a little bit, but it is sometimes they have a spot for one international outlet, and we are competing with all these countries and all these outlets and all these people that are liked and are good professionals. So I do think that having that strong network comes very useful. Now we have a question from a person that I've worked with and I know very well, Isabella Suarez. She's asked, she's starting, I know she wants to be, she's very talented and she wants to work in entertainment. And she's asking, what is the best way to reach out to participate in a junket as a freelance correspondent?
Well, do you want me to answer first?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would recommend is, sign up to the MPA, the Motion Picture Association, just so you have like a credential. So they you send them, you send clippings and proof of your work to the MPA, and then they put your name or into their roster, and every studio, every publicist is getting that list. So if you approach, let's say, a studio publicist to ask, hey, my magazine is interested in this and this movie, and we really would like to cover, and I can promise you, I don't know, a two-page story, or 5 minutes on airtime on so-and-so, at least then they have a reference. You are in the MPA list. You're not just some stranger. You have some kind of credential, so to speak. That's what I would do. Of course, if you have really no clippings at all, then you will have just to approach people. And that's a little harder. But if you a member, of the MPA or listed on the MPA, it probably will help you a lot.
Yes. And the other thing that I would say, and it worked for me at least, was to participate in film festivals. I think the first step is to have an outlet that is somewhat recognizable and somewhat that has, if it's a website that has the clicks, that you can show the work that you've done. Like I had the situation with Sundance this year. It was the first time I covered Sundance Film Festival, but the people that were organizing Sundance this year were people that I have worked with in different film festivals for so many years that I've been working, and they probably seen me in the beginning of my career. So in the beginning, I had to show them, this is the return of the space that you're giving me. So I would do sometimes 20 stories on a film festival, or I would try to do as much from one red carpet where I would interview 10 people. Most outlets would do one story on that same red carpet. I would do from each interview a different story. So I think it's showing that you have to create a portfolio, and you have to create the clippings to create that relationship of, if you give me the access, I will indeed return that access into a story that's going to look great, that's going to bring audiences to your product. And I think that that's the end goal for the gatekeepers, right? Whether they are film festival people or they are publicists for films or studios. And I would also say that sometimes when you're trying to go for the star, is much more complicated, because there are more people. Like if you have a film with Tom Hanks, everybody will want to interview Tom Hanks. So if you were new in the industry and you haven't done that many interviews, maybe try to go for an actor who has a smaller role in the film, or someone who is a newcomer that has something in common with your outlet. Let's say if it's someone from Brazil, I'll try to find a Brazilian angle, or even go and talk to people in the technical team. So you can have a great interview with the composer, with the editor, with the director of photography, and they have amazing stories. So the great thing about filmmaking and TV is that there are so many disciplines that talk to each other, that even if you're going for something a little bit more technical, it can still be a fun story for the general audience to read or to watch. So I think that that's something that, I mean, that I would suggest as the first couple of steps on getting, you know, your foot in, and then you kind of build from that.
And so let's say you asked for an interview and you were lucky to get it. You know, send them what you did.
Yeah.
Show them, you know, show proof of that it was worthy their time, and talking not just the talent, I'm talking also the publicist, because they are the gatekeepers. So, you know, be forthcoming, show them, look, and if it takes a while, because sometimes, you know, you do an interview, let's say in January, but it's not being published until December, you know, keep them updated. It's not published yet, but, you know, my magazine is very excited, or my outlet is very excited, and, you know, it's still coming. So just to keep, you know, so then they have something they can see and go like, yeah, that was worth it. And next time you ask for it, it's much easier, because you also then actually have something to show for it.
That's a thing. And I think it adds to your credibility. I think it's something that shows that you're serious about what you're doing, and you're more likely to get a second interview if you show that the first one was worth it. I actually have a interesting example. So it was at a Tribeca Film Festival years ago, and there was a documentary film that very few people were covering. And I managed to find an angle that I could use the documentary of that was called The Last Laugh. And I could publish it in, it was about the Holocaust and the humor with the Holocaust and so on. And I could use it in different Jewish outlets that I have a connection with, and I could publish a story there and, you know, highlight the documentary. So with that, I had the connection with the publicist, and eventually I was called to be part of a junket with, Christopher Walken and Jason Bateman for the film Family Fang, which was an independent film with two major stars. So that was also something that up to that point, I wasn't interviewing, you know, celebrities to that level. And because I did the documentary, they were like, you know what? We gave her the space. She was able to do something great. Now let's give her a little bit more and see what she can do. Or, you know, it's a round table. It doesn't cost to have another person there. Now we have another question here from Amulia. Can you suggest some way to build a network in a new country? As an international student, I have no connection here in Canada. So what would be a good way to build my network within the journalistic and media world?
Well, I mean, first again, you know, be invited to the screening. So even if you don't have a need to write about a movie, let's say as a review, or even have interviews for that movie, just go out, see as many movies as you can. For example, you know, go like the MPA, usually that's another benefit of the MPA. They would send you will be invited through the studios to these all media screenings, which are maybe like a day before the movie releases. Then just go there, always introduce yourself, and then just make yourself familiar also, and become a regular, you know, become a regular person, that show that you're interested, show that, you know, this is something you care about. That, for example, would be also a big start. And to the earlier point, what I would like to add is, don't ever feel like too good for something, you know, somebody isn't good enough for you, or some system isn't good enough. Of course, we all want to shine and have the big names as one-on-ones, you know, and not share it with anybody and have this exclusive. Yeah, but the reality is often not so. So be happy and content that you maybe get a round table or a press conference. I think my very first interview was for a soap opera. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really a big soap opera watcher, but it was, you know, that was my first interview. Of course, soap operas are, you know, popular all over the world, and it was for The Bold and the Beautiful. And that was my test, and it worked so well. And that's how I then started. And then, yeah, later, of course, I got other TV shows, and then I got movies, and then a little movies, and then the big movies, and it just has to build, and this doesn't happen overnight. But yeah,
and I think
good for something.
Yeah, I think that that's the key thing, is to show up and to pay your dues, as far as like, if you are given space, try to find an angle that you can use for your outlet. Or I think basically one thing that I do sometimes, if my outlet doesn't want something, like they're not interested in a story, I still show up, I still go, I'll do an Instagram story or an Instagram post, just to show that in the ways that I can, I'm trying to, you know, publish as much as I can, even if it's a brief comment on a podcast that I'm part of, that I can say, guys, I was at this premiere, or I was at this screening. I do think in Canada, you guys have Toronto Film Festival, and I don't know if you're in Toronto, but I think film festivals are a great way to get your foot in, because festivals are open for new voices of cinema. So you will have a lot of newer directors, newer actors, you know, everyone is just trying to get their work seen, and they're more willing to also give interviews and be part of that. It takes time, you know. And the other thing that I would say, that for me, even with Broadway, and then nowadays with filmmaking, is go to lectures, go to talks, to Q&As, to presentations, because first of all, you never know who's sitting next to you. And second, I cannot tell you how many times I surprise a person that ends up becoming a very known actor or a very known director, because I saw them doing this tiny little cabaret show in New York that was like 15 people seeing it. So you create that, oh, this person knows how this industry works. She's around. And I think that it starts with showing up and having genuine curiosity. I think a lot of people get distracted on the starstruckness, you know, like we all, you know, we're using Tom Hanks here as an example. Tom Hanks, we love you. But, you know, everybody wants to interview Tom Hanks, but, you know, then Colin Hanks, who is his son, when he was starting his career, you know what, he can be a very good interviewee as well. Yeah. So it's also interesting to go for someone who is not as known, or, you know, is still trying to make it, or even people that, I mean, we see that in New York all the time. They're massive on Broadway, but they're not really known in Hollywood yet.
And going back to the film festivals, at film festivals, sure, of course, some of the big studios show their movies there, or even TV shows. But many TV shows and movies at the film festivals, they are looking for a distributor. They're looking for, you know, a company, studio that will buy their film or buy their show to, you know, then air it on their, you know, channels, or, you know, distribute it in the theaters. So because of they don't have a home yet, let's say, talking studio wise, they're much more open to give interviews to anybody that even wants to listen. And of course then you, the beginner, you know, you want to listen, and you know, so that's much more it's kind of like the same thing what I had when I started, a much more open atmosphere, not so regulated, much more like, oh, let's see, you know, let's see how it goes, kind of thing. Once then a movie has been bought, especially by the big studios or big streamers, then you have to go through many more hoops to get your interview. So that's why also the film festival definitely is a great starting platform to get your foot in, and you know, focus on the little movies, the independent films, that they're grateful for any kind of coverage, because they're not spoiled on their end.
And here is also the thing, you never know what's going to become huge. Last year, the two of us were at South by Southwest, and the opening night film was Everything Everywhere All at Once. And there were a lot of people that say, this film, there is no one really famous. It's not going to go anywhere. Like, this is very
crazy. It's a crazy film.
It's a crazy film. It makes no sense. Did you get the summary of it? And then all of a sudden, the film is a front runner for the Oscars. So, and all the actors are winning all these awards. So the thing is, you never know. Like, that's why I highly recommend that you first of all, watch as much as you can. It's education. If you want to work in this industry, you have to understand the art, you know, like whether it is TV, whether it is film, even theater, you have to know what the craft is. And I think that qualifies also the type of interview you do, because if you are invited to a round table and you have good questions and the talent likes you and the publicist
can see that you're bringing good questions, chances are you're going to be invited again because you are building your credibility as a journalist. Now, we're bringing up a lot of names, and I have to ask because I think that this is a normal question that I get all the time, and I have always been curious about you in that sense. It's what we're like, we meet a lot of people, we interview a lot of talent, we've interviewed massive names throughout this many years in the industry. What
I know
were
the
one,
question is coming.
it's the basic question. Who were you ever starstruck by someone, like, or who was your favorite interview?
Because I started wanting to become a doctor in life. And so Hollywood or even movie stars weren't, and even once I met them, I wasn't starstruck ever. I was just interested in them as human beings, seriously, and also I'm not, because I have a different view of the world. I don't look at it like, oh, wow, the big Hollywood, bubble. To me, it's like, no, I'm much more grounded on earth. It's like, oh my God, this is a little insane. This is a little too rich and too, fancy and too. So I'm very, very grounded in that. And so I never was really starstruck. The only person that I was starstruck was because, I'm going to say first the name, Jane Goodall. I got to interview her in 2017 when Net Geo, National Geographic, was doing a documentary called Jane. And so I got to interview her. I was like, oh my God. So I met my idol. But why was I so impressed by her? Not because she was a star, because she wouldn't even consider herself a star, but because of what she has done, how she has, the impact she had in this world, what she's done for the chimpanzees, for nature, for preservation. And that was why I was so in awe getting to finally talk to her, not so much because, they're driving a Ferrari or have like a 500-room mansion somewhere at the whatever. So no, if you want to impress me, and I'm talking now, if a star wants to impress me, they have to do something good. Leonardo DiCaprio, who's really, really into environmental issues and really trying to make a difference. Jeff Bridges, who is really much trying to fight hunger, here in America. And so basically saying no child should go hungry, that to me is impressive. Those people are impressive to me. Anybody who's really trying to bring awareness to anything, whether that's mental health, physical health, environment, poverty, systemic injustices here in the United States or wherever in the world, those people impress me. Not so much the ones that I just like to glitter and shine and think just because, they have, I don't know, make some, I don't know, have like $1 billion opening at the box office. No, that's not, even though it's impressive. Come on, let's not, it's impressive.
It's a business. I'm always very impressed.
But no, they don't impress me personally. You have to do something to impress me.
Well, I've always loved Hollywood and the performing arts industry, but it's very funny because I had a colleague of mine who was my crew member for many years, and she was always shocked that I was very starstruck with the Broadway people, not necessarily like, Alan Menken, who composed most of the Disney classic films that we've seen in the 90s. I didn't even know what to ask him because I was so starstruck. But then, you would have Viola Davis and I would do a very nice professional interview. Yes, impressed, but, But for me, similar, just a couple of weeks ago, thanks to the HFPA, I was able to meet Steven Spielberg, who I haven't interviewed him, but that for me was something that I had to pinch myself that, wow, like I've met my favorite director and had a conversation with him. And also the same night I met John Williams, who I did not have a conversation with because I was unable to verbalize anything to him. I think music for me might make me a little bit more starstruck, but just the idea of, being able to be there and meet them it's outstanding. But I always say this, I always prefer, we have a lot of interviews, but they're quick. You don't really get to know. I think people have the impression that we're always with celebrities and, we're best friends and whatnot, because that's also part of the business. You do have to create that you know, that quick rapport and make everyone look comfortable and have fun with it. It's a fun, we're not covering politics, we're not covering economics, we're covering entertainment. It's supposed to be fun. But I always like when I do work on a cover story or when I work on a long form interview, because I think you get to know the person you're interviewing. So for me, Isabella Rossellini is one that I, you know, take to heart. I worked with her for a cover for Marie Claire, and we had 2-3 hours, you know, doing the interview and then the photo shoot. So that was a full day that was like, okay, that was something very special in my career. Guys,
Well, if I may add something else, I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people, but when it comes to Hollywood, so let's put Jane Goodall aside. She isn't really like in the Hollywood industry, but if I talk the Hollywood industry, I certainly have an affinity for the filmmakers or even the showrunners of shows. That to me, they have so much to say. You know, also when you interview them, sometimes, especially the beginning stars, they don't even. It's like pulling teeth. But if you get a filmmaker, I mean, I'm not just talking Martin Scorsese, where you literally talk, you know, ask one question and he will talk 3 hours. I'm talking like any filmmaker or showrunner. They have a vision that they want to share, and they have something to say, and actors as well. I mean, I'm not putting them down, but I always had a huge affinity and still have a huge affinity for filmmakers and showrunners. And I, sorry to brag, but I have interviewed Steven Spielberg mostly through the HFPA, but also through junkets, through roundtables, many times. And it doesn't matter if you interview them short or long, but if you do this long enough, like me for 30 years, you meet them again, like sometimes on a yearly basis. And then they recognize at least your face. They might not know, oh, this is Anke. They might maybe know, oh, maybe this isn't the German girl. Maybe if you're lucky.
That happens.
They recognize your face, and the moment they come into the room, they're like, oh, I know that one. You know, I mean, they don't know me, but it's less scary, because just imagine you're doing a junket and you're the talent, right? So, and you come into the room, you don't know who to expect. I mean, you get the whole list, but what do names mean? Nothing. And then they go into the room, don't know what to expect. What kind of questions will I get? Will the people be nice? Will they be, you know, offensive? Will they be aggressive, or will they be kind of kind? You don't know. And then you come in, and then you see a face you've seen many times before, and that puts them right away at ease. I've had it many times at junkets. Of course, probably getting an evil look from my colleagues, kind of like, why do they not? I mean, they're jealous then, of course, but I've gotten it so many times. I had once, it was right after the Golden Globes. The Golden Globes happened Sunday. I had to literally take the Monday morning 6 a.m. flight to do a one-on-one with Richard Gere for my outlet. So I'm flying. I had to rent a car the moment I'm there, because he is a little bit like, I forgot the town, like an hour outside north of New York. Had to drive. Of course, there was traffic like hell. I was like, fine, and I'm on the phone with the publicist. I'm coming. The publicist is like, if you're not here in 5 minutes, he's gonna leave. And I'm like, oh shit. You know, and I'm like, already, I mean, my German driving skills, right? You know, I'm like acting like it's the Autobahn. I'm driving there. And so I literally get there, I get out of the car, the publicist pulls me. I don't even have time to put my mind together.
Okay.
I mean, thank goodness, you know, that's why you should always be prepared as a journalist. And I go in, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, you know, shaking because from all the adrenaline. And the first thing he says, oh, I know that girl. Okay, you know, let's have a cup of coffee first. I was like, what did I rush for? But because he didn't know who would be coming, he was kind of like, okay, damn, where's that journalist?
And I think that goes back to the point that we're making before. Ask good questions. If you ask good questions, you will be remembered as someone who does ask good questions, and they want to ask.
Listen, be polite. You can ask whatever you want, even controversial things, maybe things that are a little, you know, if you're polite, and if a talent says, I don't want to talk about it, respect it.
Yeah.
Respect it. But be nice, be kind, be friendly. That they will remember, because it's also a scary world for them, you know, because they really don't know what to expect. And then
nowadays, even more, right? Because the cancel culture and anything you say can be taken out of context. So that is something that I'm always very careful to show that I'm there to help them promote their work and look good, not to be their enemies. So, and it's usually, I get a lot of very good questions, good answers, just because they know I'm not going to use that information in the wrong way. And it's not the type of journalism that I do. So I think it's part of you creating your, that goes back to when we were talking on the phone before this, to create your own style as a journalist, to find out what is your voice as an entertainment journalist, unlike covering politics and unlike covering economics or having to explain current events and so on. With entertainment, it should be fun and you can do it your way. You know, if you like, I always, if I'm doing a red carpet, I always like to make them laugh. And I try to make it a fun thing because it's fun for that. Like, imagine they go through 50 people before me. And by the time they get to me, they probably answer the same question a million times. So I try to break the ice and make them, you know, have fun. And it usually turns out to be a lot of fun for me as well. So
Yeah,
the challenge changes, right? In the beginning, your challenge is, I want to get the question. Now it's like, okay, how do I get them to enjoy? And then I can ask a good question.
be creative. Don't ask everything, you know, but the usual questions. Don't you ask the usual suspects. Just be creative and always be kind. And
Always,
so
yeah.
always smile. Yeah, you're good at that. And
Well, I'm Brazilian. It comes with the DNA, you know. I already say hi, I'm already smiling. Now, one thing that you know, you brought it up, and I want to make sure that we do touch on that subject before, you know, it's over. And guys, please, if you have any question, any comments, just keep sending in. But award shows, because you and I are very involved with award shows. You've been on this longer than I have, but it was something that I didn't realize. It didn't occur to me how big part of the industry they actually were, because I always understood the film festival world, and then all of a sudden, wow, like you have so many awards. So I wanted to know from your perspective a little bit of the importance of these award shows and the impact that they actually do on making sure that people will see the films on ticket sales or whatever it is. Why are we doing this? Golden Globes, Oscars, you know, SAG Awards, and so on.
Oh, you know why? Okay. Generally speaking, I would say the awards themselves have gotten a little bit less. I think in the beginning, the awards were a way to bring glamour to the regular people, either through, I mean, talking very, very long time ago. I mean, I don't remember when the Oscars started, but the Golden Globes started. I think they had the first in 43, so that wasn't televised or anything. That was then just in print, so photos, and that was just a way to bring glamour and the red carpet and the, you know, the stars to the regular folks reading the papers and then later watching the shows, because that was their only way to get a glimpse of a movie star. I mean, what we're doing, you know, meeting those stars is very unusual. Well, I come from a little village, you know, or like a little town rather in Germany, and I grew up very normal educational system, a very, you know, normal middle class kind of family. I would have never even dreamed about being in Hollywood, interviewing all these actors and directors and stars. I mean, but a regular person, you know, an everyday person, they never have any kind of way or chance to touch these stars. And so that's where the awards shows became also so big. And then like especially during the 80s, there was this big boom also through shows like Dallas and Dynasty, and where they show riches and glitz and glamour. And then, you know, it all became bigger and bigger. Now, of course, a lot of actors have a direct relationship with their fans through their Instagram, when they do live Instagram thingies or Twitters or whatever. And stars are not as, you know, these
unreachable.
unreachable,
Yeah.
or these, almost like, aliens, somewhere that you can, from another planet that you will never be able to reach. So I mean, I think it's a little less. So people have seen these stars already now in so many red carpets. And it's a little saturation effect here. So I think the Golden Globes included, the Oscars, everybody. I mean, on March 12th, we're going to see how the Oscars will do.
Yeah.
Of course, it's always still the biggest of them all. The the motherlode, the mothership. But yeah, we all, I think, yeah, we all have to think about, and I think the Oscars as well. How can we change? How can we adapt to stay relevant? So they're still very, very relevant. Certainly for the talent themselves, winning an Oscar is, like if we would win the Pulitzer, right? That would be something. So the highest award and reward for all your hard work. But I think the significance of the awards in general has lessened, but that doesn't mean it can become big again.
Yeah, I actually disagree with you. I was giving an interview earlier today to a colleague who works in a Brazilian outlet, and she asked me about, is the Oscars still relevant? She asked me that question. And I, in my answer that I was very much aligned with what you said. I do think that as far as a broadcast and as a TV show, we need to update these awards and maybe make it more interesting. As someone who has attended a few of this, it's still very relevant because you will see networks happening. You will see, Spielberg talking to Tim Burton, and maybe I want them to work together. So they need to meet at some point. So you do see that the industry needs those moments where they can be in the same room and have those connections. But I was remembering when Parasite won, and how much that helped a South Korean film to be seen by people that would have never seen a South Korean film before. Even if you had, I think we had Squid Games today because Parasite won an Oscar. And Parasite won an Oscar because it won a lot of film festivals and then a lot of awards, and everybody started to see it. So I don't think that the Oscars will make a difference to like a Top Gun, because that was already a record breaker. But it will make to that one tiny little film like Coda, like Parasite, like these films that wouldn't be seen maybe otherwise.
Well, to the talent and also to the films, the Oscars are most definitely still, or even the Golden Globes, they're relevant.
Yeah.
It's really, really important. Even to the audiences, let's say abroad, which they feel much more disconnected to maybe Hollywood and the stars. So to them, it might also be a little bit more relevant. But since it is also show business, it is all about money. And so the Oscars, just as much as any other award show, they need to get, back on the business trail as well. And in order to also survive, because eventually, for those who don't know, the Oscars air on ABC, that contract is up and then it has to be renewed. And since it is about money and about renewal, I mean, look, SAG Awards didn't have a home for a year until now. Just recently, Netflix said, okay, this year we're going to put you on YouTube and next year you're going to be live streamed on Netflix. So that was the first, oh my God, an award show on a streamer. But SAG didn't have a home for I don't know how many months, and they didn't know what the future was holding. So it is really difficult. And so all award shows should get together and think how, because the truth is also the stronger each individual award show gets, the stronger also the
whole system.
So it's sometimes people, of course, wishing like, oh, I hope that award show goes away. You're actually cutting, you're hurting yourself. Or be careful what you wish for, because if you kick off one, that means, oh, everything can be kicked off. You are actually putting the entire system on shaky grounds. That is at least my opinion on my experience. Like last year, since it's known that we are HFPA members on vote for the Golden Globes. Last year, when we didn't have an aired, a broadcasted Golden Globes, I did feel there was a a void
A
in the
void,
industry.
yeah.
I really felt there was a void. And I'm not saying that because I wanted to Golden Globes to come back or have like a stake at it. It is my true feeling. I really felt, you know, the Golden Globes were successful because, let's put it in comparison, of course, to the Oscars, the Golden Globes were the little appetizer that kind of whetted the appetite of the audience. And then, you know, it was a whole thing going. And then you had as your, you know, delicious dessert was the Oscars. So it was the main cause.
The Golden Globes was the overture to the rest of the award season, I think. And then you have the grand finale, which is the Oscars.
It made the audience hungry. It made them like, I want to see this race. I want to see how it's going. So, and somebody needs to do that, whether it's the Oscars or the Golden Globes or something else. But there needs to be somebody who tickles them and makes them hungry.
So guys, we have only a few minutes left. If you have any more questions, to send it to us, please, you know, make your way to the Q&A. But just to start, you know, wrapping up, I mean, we could talk about this for hours. We often do this, and it's always nice to get different perspectives on the industry. And but I wanted to know, if you were to advise someone who is starting this career in entertainment journalism, what would be your biggest advice or your biggest suggestion?
Biggest advice: put your expectations low. True. I mean, especially right now, the world going through recession, and, you know, I mean, we could look when the pandemic hit, and then the lockdown, and everything had to change. I mean, thank goodness our industry was capable of quickly picking up and go, oh, well, we'll do it virtual. But things can change in a split second. That's certainly what this whole pandemic proved and has proven. And we don't know. So put your expectations low, but never stop dreaming. Never stop dreaming or hoping and trying. But don't be pushy. Don't be, you know, nasty. You will get a lot of no's. So when you ask for an interview and you get no's, don't be kind of like, don't be aggressive, don't be, you know, pissy or anything. Be just like, okay, you know, better luck next time. And so keep on going, because you will get that lucky break and you will get that lucky moment. And that can happen after a week, after a month, after a year, after 5 years, who knows? But you have to decide who you want to be. Do you want to be a pusher that is, or like even a bully in this industry, you know, and you will get you will get far until to a point where it then backfires. Or do you want to do it with kindness, and it might go slower, but I recommend the latter way, you know, try to kill them with kindness. That's my motto, and it will work, and if not, at least you tried, right?
Yeah, Fern Malice, who was the founder of New York Fashion Week, actually wrote an article about being nice. Like, you can always be nice. There's many ways many things you can do, but being nice, it's something that regardless of what's happening, you can always do. And, you know, I echo everything you said, and a little and more. Don't take the no's personally. You will get a lot of no's. Sometimes you're in an outlet that is not liked or not popular or not important enough for a specific film. And then sometimes you're going to get an amazing ass that you don't even believe. But I do think don't underestimate the power of connections and networking. I've been one that I've made a lot of my friends in waiting during a red carpet, whether they were other journalists, whether they were publicists, and you create connections, you exchange ideas. One person can recommend you to the next job. And I mean, I personally got a lot of my jobs and a lot of my gigs through social media, because people, like the right people, were following me on my social media. I don't have a lot of followers, but it was a way that I could publish my portfolio and create a connection. And the publicists would like what I posted as well. So I think you have to think of yourself as your own brand if you're a freelancer, which is very much our case. And you're there representing your country. You're there representing your outlets. And most importantly, you're there representing a whole group of international correspondents, because as international correspondents, we do have less access than domestic media. So when one of us, it's not polite, when one of us is rude, when one of us is inappropriate, it looks bad on all of us.
And I do take that to heart every time that I do something, because it's so hard to get that access, that
Mhm.
if I can do a little bit better and help the next person to come in, I try to. But yeah, I think that that would be my advice. Do you have anything to add, or how?
Well, this world, I'm going to do the reality check. This world can be very cruel, especially
is.
these days with social media and stuff. But I think a very big thing you pointed out is don't take things personal. I think that is very, very important. And, you know, if you're kind and nice to people, and that, again, it doesn't mean you can't ask, let's say, difficult questions. You absolutely can in a nice way. But if you're kind, you know, they have less room to attack you, because they will attack. I mean, Miriam and Ivy spoke quickly about, you know, before we would do this, you know, and we kind of said, we're being as a correspondent, as an immigrant, as an, you know, international person here in the United States, you're being held to a different standard.
Yeah.
You know, things are, you know, asked of you ethically or morally to that maybe, you know, other maybe domestic journalists get away with. It's not fair, but it is what it is. But don't take it personal, and just try and keep trying and do your best. So
Yeah.
that's what I would also say. And this world can be cruel. I mean, just look at what they call film Twitter. If you know, there's a certain, but like, for example, shall I go there? You know, like Babylon, you know, there was like people who, either people liked Babylon or loved Babylon, or people hated
it.
But then there was kind of like, I guess, the big voices, or the, let's not even call big, the loud voices in film Twitter and in the critics, you were decided, oh no, you can't like it. And then when you did actually say I liked it, some people didn't even dare to say they liked it, because you're so intimidated. And something like that, I find I've seen this trend, especially on social media, that is very, you know, cruel and very unkind. And I find that very, very sad, because we should embrace that some people like something and some people don't like something, because that's what the beauty of the world is. That's why we are actually in the United States as correspondent, because we bring in, you know, diversity, variety, different opinions, different tastes. And that's beautiful. Imagine everybody likes the same movie. How boring. We wouldn't even need an award show if everybody liked
because
the same
that's
thing.
obvious. Yeah.
That's also the beauty. I mean, I know then the award shows get criticized if one award show has this winner and another award show has that winner, and because the only winner that counts is the Oscars.
That is something that, before we finish this, I want to clarify. When a film or an actor doesn't get nominated or doesn't win, it does not mean it was snubbed. It just means that it didn't get the majority of the votes. It probably got a lot of the votes, because for me, it changed. I now celebrate the Oscar nominations day as the day when we pass the torch from the Golden Globes, because until that day, we get a lot of the complaints that this person did get nominated, that film should have been nominated. And then when the Oscar comes, it's like, okay, now you guys get the same complaints. Now you snub people. No, we get a lot of votes, and a lot of the times we don't agree. I mean, that's the beauty, and that's the beauty of entertainment, that I think it's where we should, you know, end this. It's entertainment and art and culture it depends on your taste. Something that speaks to you. It's subjective, and something that speaks to you doesn't necessarily has to speak to the other people. So, you know, trust your voice, trust your taste. Remember your audience. You're there to report to your audience. And yes, we're thinking about the inside industry things, but at the end of the day, what you're doing is to help films and series and cultural projects to be seen by people that might not have thought about it. So that's what I always keep in mind when I'm covering, when I'm like, okay, this is me being curious, or this is something my audience would know.
Yeah. Well, Miriam, before we go, because it's time to go, I think, I want to thank you for picking me as your panelist and you know, as your discussion partner, or I don't know, you know, just like, you know, because I know you now for like 2 years or something, and I think the way I connected to you was through your kindness, you know, and I felt like, oh, there's a soul out there that I feel like connected with. And so we've done a couple of things together, like South by Southwest. We've done a couple of podcasts together, and it's always a pleasure to, be in your presence, be talking with you, and even brainstorming like what we did for an hour now about this subject. So thank you for picking me, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me, and thank you for taking the time to do this talk for us. It's so important. And I always love brainstorming and chatting with you. It's always a pleasure. And, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. And I echo what you said. I think we connected right when we met in the first meeting with the foreign correspondents in the US, the club and the association. So, may this be the first of many, many things we do together with the HFPA and the club and Association of Foreign Press Correspondents in the US. Thank you so much.